56, 59, 62, and it's going up and down, and it ends right at 59, and we've lost. And I'm sitting right next to me, I realize, are the 3 lobbyists for CCA. And I'm feeling just completely broken. I'm like, you know, we've got these 3 lobbyists who know the ins and outs of Springfield. I just graduated from U of I, and I care a lot about this, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And Speaker Madigan says, we're going to call it again. And you can hear a loud hiss from one side of the room. I'm not going to say which side it was, but there was a loud hiss. They were pissed. They were really angry that the vote was going to get called up again. And meanwhile, right next to me, the 3 lobbyists for CCA immediately get on their cell phones. And I can see that they're calling some of the state reps to figure out where they're going to pull the votes off again. Meanwhile, I don't have cell phones of the different states' reps, so I'm not able to actually keep in touch with even our floor sponsor, right? The vote comes up again, and this time we lose by 3 votes. And I don't really know nothing about the process, only to find out that Speaker Madigan is going to call it for the 3rd time, the 3rd and final time. At this point, state legislators on the ground, even some of our supporters, are really angry. They're like, this is ridiculous. It got voted on, it got shot down. And next to me, the CCA lobbyists are calling again. And at this point, we're, you know, trying to run down to the floor to try and figure out who we can pull off to figure out where are we going to get the votes. The vote comes up once more, and we lose by 1 vote. And the 1 vote that we missed was Naomi Jacobson. She was our co-sponsor, and I spoke to her afterwards. I was practically in tears, and she said, I thought I'd pushed yes. And on her voting record, it said not present. And so we had just almost passed this statewide legislation, which would have prevented CCA from building in Joliet. We were brokenhearted, but a week after we had actually missed passing the legislation, because the folks in Crete had been so persistent in on-the-ground work, they actually scared the trustees about their next coming elections, which were coming up in a couple months. And the trustees were so shocked about what was going on the statewide level and locally, they voted unanimously to kick CCA out. So even though we had lost on the statewide level, because of the work that had happened locally, but they moved on. CCA decided to pick Joliet. And I'm almost running out of time. I love telling stories, but they're taking up my time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, specifically why coalition building and fighting these detention centers is so important. Joliet is it has about 145,000 residents. It's a bit bigger than Joliet, which makes our job a bit harder. We've got a lot more people to convince on why not to build a detention center. You can see on the map that it's actually split in 2 by a river. And Joliet is extremely segregated. On the east side of Joliet is predominantly the African American and Latino community. On the west side is the more upper middle class white families. And what's particularly interesting about Joliet is it's got 8 city council members. Together, the Latino and African American population make up about 45% of Joliet. And yet they've only got 2 representatives, 2 African American representatives that represent the east side. Meanwhile, on the other side, there's 4, and then there's the at-large city council members. There are no Latino elected representatives, and the amount of political will around trying to get this detention center in Joliet was huge. And so I went to Joliet to try and figure out how we were going to work with folks to fight the detention center. The first person I met with was a priest, Catholic priest, Father Lesher, who is about 6'3". He's 78 years old. He's getting close to retiring. And he's got one of the filthiest mouths I've ever heard. He tried to use every opportunity he could to swear. And I asked him, I said, Father Lesher, you know, the Latino community can't do this alone. What can we do to get the African American community and the Latino community to work together? And he said, brother, it's not going to happen. It's just, we've tried this in the past and it just hasn't happened. And the way we looked at it was there was no way we were going to be able to prevent this from happening without working with our African American brothers and sisters and actually having support between the two different communities. So we started to organize. We actually started to go to different African American pastors, to the different Latino pastors and priests, and started holding meetings where we actually talked. We had conversations between African American leaders and the Latino leaders in the community and said, how is it that we can find common ground on this? And Joliet, for those of you who don't know, already has 2 prisons in it. Both of which are in the one's already been shut down and the other's in the process of being shut down. But it's got this history of incarceration. And the African American, a lot of the leaders they were like, we get it. We get it. We don't want another detention center here, and we know that if they're not locking you guys up, they're going to continue to lock us up. So for us, we see common ground in fighting against this together. So they actually started to organize candidates forums. They actually started to go door knocking. It was for me, it was an eye-opening experience. For somebody who had been working predominantly in the Latino community, working with immigrants, it was really neat to be able to see that, through conversations, we can actually come up with understanding about why we're in a lot of this together. So we knew we couldn't go after the statewide legislation, not because we couldn't bring it up again, but because we were going to lose. CCA kept those 3 lobbyists on retainer, so they were ready to go whenever we started to push again, and we weren't going to be able to sneak by them again and pass something out of the Senate really quickly. So we knew what we had to do was fight locally. Unfortunately, because of the representation there, we didn't really have the city council members that were ready to back us. The 2 African American city council members that represented the East Side weren't willing to come out, even though they had a lot of African American leaders saying, you've got to get right on this issue. So the Joliet folks decided to do a Get Out the Vote program. This is one of their first meetings that they held together, of which we invited the local state rep, and we did a whole training for folks on how to go door knocking, how do we talk about the messaging, and after that week, for the next 5 months, every weekend we had 20 to 30 people going door knocking, and it made a huge difference. For the first time during the next city council election, the white city council members were terrified that all of a sudden the African American community and the Latino community had come together. This is a picture during, it was an MLK celebration where we had Latino and African American musicians come together to jam about social justice and talk about the need to do the Get Out the Vote work. By the time the elections came up, there were 3 city council members who were shoo-ins. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, came this young candidate who said, my issue is going to be the detention center. I'm going to make this my issue. And for the next 2 months of his campaign, he actually worked really hard to speak. This was a young white man who actually spoke really well about the issues that the African American community and the Latino community had together. And he said, we're going to fight against this detention center. And he got no funding from the local Democratic Party, which he was a member of. He actually got denounced by the other city council members who said, this guy isn't going to represent you. And for the first time, folks in the community actually felt like they had somebody who was going to champion their cause. During the elections, for the first time ever, the African American community and the Latino community came out ready to promote an issue and to select a candidate that they felt really, really good about. In the election, they knocked out the guy who everybody thought was going to win, who had the most money of every other person, and not only beat him in municipal elections, which are decided between 30 and 40 votes, he won by over 1,000. And most of those votes were coming from the East Side, which nobody expected was ever going to happen. And it completely changed the way that Joliet actually thought about one, building a detention center, and 2, about a community that was predominantly silent. And what's shocking about this is, all of a sudden we had African Americans and Latinos showing up to meetings together and all on the same page with a united agenda. And people were particularly they created these Joliet for-profit immigrant prison signs.